Welcome back to the solo training series for the Academy of Self-Defense. Once again, we're looking at classical technique and using the ability to pantomime technique when you're by yourself to practice your classicals. For this particular one, we're going to look at the armbar. The armbar is used by a lot of martial arts, not just Aikido or Aikijitsu or what have you, or the Aiki arts. You see arm bars in a lot of martial arts, and you know, each art has its own take on it. I'm going to show you what we believe to be a pretty efficient arm bar. And looking at this from a classical perspective, we're once again in our squared off position. We're one arm length away, and important, and this is for the beginners especially, you as the nage, the one doing the technique, it's your responsibility to set up your uke in the correct position. Remember, this is our blueprint. This is not the way we would set up an armbar in a fluid combat or self-defense situation, okay? But this is teaching us the correct blueprint of the technique, like a kata. So we have to make sure we're setting ourselves up for success to understand the technique. So one arm length away, box or squared off position, meaning my feet are straight, the uke's feet are straight, and I'm being gripped on my left hand cross grip. So that means the uke is gripping me with their left hand. Okay, so that's a cross hand grip. Okay, so I'll do it first and I'll explain. And there's your tap from the rear. Same hand. There's your tap. This way. And this way. Okay. So, breaking this down. When we're starting, hands are going to come up. The number one mistake on this technique is keeping the attacker away from you. The further they're away from you, the further you leave them in the position they started as you're moving, and I don't have them connected to my center line, the more we're apt to use muscle. Okay? The idea of a martial art is not to use muscle. When you're muscling technique, it's not technique. Okay, so I'll talk about the points in this technique where you're going to use muscle if you mess up. And that's the first one right here. So as we come up, hands up position. As my hands come up, my hand's going to work to the outside of the wrist. Okay? And you want to visualize the hand. Now, this is all happening all at once, obviously. I'm just breaking down this movie into frames. Okay, so frame number one would be here. As I begin to step, this starts to what I like to call putting the sword in the scabbard. The uke's arm is the sword. It's going to go back in my scabbard. So as it comes up and I begin my step, this is where it connects into my hip, into my scabbard. Now, by doing this, I'm attaching them to my hip, which is the strongest part of my movement right now, to my center line. So now when I slide across, and the elbow's right here, my hand's in a chop position, 45 degrees, just above the elbow joint, and at a slight angle. As this foot starts to step or slide back, I'm going to keep the uke attached to my hip. So if I do this, they will go with this technique. They will follow the pain. So as I slide across and I pivot, visualize the arm, they should be right here. If they did not move with you with no effort, that means you left a gap, you left a space. Okay? And especially in the beginning, if you leave those spaces and you're working with a beginner and you're a beginner, that's where really this is going to be glaring. Okay? All right, so I'll do it from this position with this arm. So now I'm being gripped on my right arm. Okay? With the uke's right arm this way, the cross hand mat. So hands come up. Again, here's the hand. Visualize grabbing the wrist. As I begin to put this in the scabbard, I step, pivot, back is straight. Also, beginners want to lean on this, and you should not be leaning at any part of this technique. You're in a good front stance. The arm's right here. The wrist should be higher than the elbow. The chop should be 45 degrees just above the elbow joint, grinding in. And now when I kneel, and by the way, at this point, the uke should already be on one knee, following the pain. From here, I'm going to continue the pressure down the elbow, lifting up on the wrist, and kneeling straight down. The uke should be right here. Their body and their arms should be perpendicular to each other. I should be on the elbow. I put pressure over the elbow with my shoulders as I lift the wrist off the mat. And if you should get a tap relatively quickly. If you don't, that means again you left the space. Your hand wasn't positioned on the elbow correctly. Okay? So one more thing I want to talk about before I do a full slow pantomime is footwork. The very first thing that I do as an instructor when I teach this technique is show the footwork. So what I'll do is I'll break this down again into frames. And this analogy I got from my instructor, Mr. Weber, I never forgot it. In that, pretend you're on one train track right here. You're on a train track going this way. I want to split my cars. These are my cars. So this car steps back and changes tracks. So now I'm on two tracks, A and B. From now on, these cars do not converge on the same track anymore. Meaning that this slides all the way across on this track, as far as I can go, and now I pivot. When I pivot here and I stay on that same track, when I pivot, I should be in a perfect front stance with the correct foot back. The rule is, the uke's right here, the closest knee wants to be down next to the uke. That's the rule. And I always get asked why. I'll switch this way so you can see. Imagine the attacker's here, the uke's here. Remember, it doesn't always end right here. And in an application standpoint, I never advocate kneeling. I always prefer to lock out in a standing position. Okay? When I kneel, my chances of this turning into a ground altercation goes higher. Okay? And we'll talk more about that in applications. But from this perspective, if I'm here and they begin to roll on me, begin to pull, right? So if I'll play the uke and I'm here, the attacker. Remember, if you don't lock me out right away, I'm going to be apt to turn and cradle up this way. Okay? And if your foot is here and I cradle this way, I can grab that leg and now I can bring you down to the ground with me. The other way that this happens is if I'm here and they turn into you, they've just turned into your knee. Right? They've turned into this and you're breaking your hip this way and there's no stability. The chances of them bringing you to the ground and them taking your back are very high. Not to mention hurting your knee or your hip or your ankle. Okay? So when I'm here, and the uke is right here, if they begin to move, I can make adjustments. Right? I can be here and make adjustments. I can start to get them into what I call a wedge and lock them out even further. At the very least, if they start to turn and I think I'm compromised, I can get back up. Okay? Conversely, if I'm this way, again, like I said before, if they come in, look, my knee and my hip's compromised, and it's hard for me to make any kind of quick adjustments. Okay? So, one more time. Pantomiming very slowly. And tap. We'll do it from this side. Tap. I hope that helps. Again, practice these very slowly and be mindful of all the nuances and details of the technique when you do so. And remember to make your adjustments when you're not on the mark. Thank you.